Age group semifinals is a wrap, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why the whole age group semifinals made me a little bit sad. I was disappointed to see the biggest news coming out of the age group semifinals being the technical difficulties of the leaderboard. So we have a 60 to 64-year-old athlete competing at our gym in semifinals, hopefully going to the games, in a game spot right now. But after the scoreboard came out on Saturday, I asked someone, oh, how is Yvonne doing? And their first reaction, the first thing they said to me was, the leaderboard is messed up. And that's just not what I wanted to hear. And it's not what the athletes want to be dealing with when they are working on something that is likely going to be the most important part of their season. Yes, going to the games is important, but this middle step of getting to the games is even more important. If you don't do well here, you're not going to be at the games in Madison. So this is likely the most vital part of their season. It is a lot of how they weigh their success this season. So it was extremely disappointing to see the focus taken away from all of these awesome athletes and put on this disappointing leaderboard. Brian Friend put up an Instagram story, and I'm going to read it to you because I think it really summarized up a lot of the issues here. There are 540 athletes eligible to compete this weekend in the age group semifinals. Due to the fact that CrossFit has been unable to properly execute their own published scoring system, I haven't heard anyone talk about the athletes or their performances at all today. It's happening too often. When we should be highlighting athletic performance and achievement, we're dwelling on errors that are amateur and far too frequent. It serves as a counter to the narrative that the sport is professionalizing. That pretty much says it all. I do want to point out there's been a lot of changes in the sport since 2020 when Greg Glassman left. Then we had Eric Rosa. Then we had Don Fall. It's just been a lot of changing going on. Then there was Dave Castro, who ended up leaving his position or being fired. And then we had Adrian Bosman put into that position. Just so many changes. And right now, this is the first year that Adrian Bosman is in his position for a full season, and the first year that Don Fall is the CEO for a full season. And I think they should have taken this opportunity to set themselves up for success. And I think what would have helped with that is just simplifying things. This may not have been the year to try out a different scoring system with having some of the events weighted as 50 points instead of 100 points. Usually on the online portion, we do tend to see a uniform 100-point system. I understand that the two events that ended up being 50-point events are very specific. They're just one movement. And it makes sense to have that only weighted as half a score. Totally, I get that. But I think that when there is so much going on right now, so much change, new people in positions, we just had the firings last week, that it may have made sense just to streamline things for this year. You could still create a great test and not make it any more difficult for people at CrossFit to execute like they did here by giving themselves a more complicated leaderboard. Because it was 100 points for every event, that's standard. It is easier to program that from the back end so the leaderboard is going to look correct. And I will admit, obviously this isn't that difficult to program, although I, of course, don't know what's going on with CrossFit systems and who's in place there. But Mike Halpin, who is one man, seemed to have figured out a better way, at least to get closer to the actual leaderboard than what CrossFit was able to do. And he's just one man. So yes, it may not be as technically challenging as some other things, but obviously it posed a challenge. And I think that in this state of change within the CrossFit ecosystem, it may have made sense just to make this all a little bit easier on them so that things could look more professional and that the athletes could know where they stood at this point, 2 days after it finished, 3 days after it finished. So I'm hoping maybe they'll do that in the future. I totally think there could be a use for what they were doing this year. I just don't think the first year of Bosman and Dawn was the time to do that. And like I've said before, we're gonna use this as another opportunity to say, this is just my opinion. I am just one person and I am just explaining what I think, and I love to hear your opinions, so you can leave those in the comments, even if they differ from mine, but these are just my thoughts. That's it. Oh, and speaking of thoughts, I do also want to use this opportunity as a plug for something new that just popped up. Brian Friend, who I've already mentioned during this video because of his Instagram post that so beautifully put what happened this weekend, he has created a new website. It is called befriendlyfitness.com. You should check it out. I think it's gonna have some great stuff on it. I don't really know anything about what's going to be there, but I'm always impressed with what Brian Friend puts out. So I definitely think it's something worth you checking out if you haven't yet. I will link it below. I think it's awesome to see people in this space growing and creating new things. I truthfully believe that rising tides raise all boats. So I think that all of us doing well helps all of us continue to do well. So I want to see Brian Friend succeed in his new venture. So check that out. Talking about success, now let's talk a little bit about some of the awesome performances that we saw this weekend that we haven't talked about because we're talking about the Arizona leaderboard. We're gonna read off some of the winners and go through some of the people who had some pretty incredible performances this weekend, because anyone who is at the top of any of these leaderboards is pretty incredible. So starting with the men, we have Rich Froning Jr. winning the men's field over Scott Panchek by just, it looks like, 2 points, if this is correct, although I know the leaderboard is still under review. I am very excited to see Scott Panchek competing here. I know he made a run at individuals last year before being injured, and I think he is just an incredible athlete and human and ambassador for CrossFit. I don't know if you've seen it, but CrossFit made a really great video about him, and it's on their YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out, you should do that after this. Or if you want to, you could do it now, but then come back to this.
Always seen myself as an affiliate owner that is an athlete and not an athlete that is an affiliate owner.
I would talk more about Rich winning the men's 35-39 division because it is super impressive, especially because he's not training like he used to. But I don't think he's going to the games. It's like he puts on this incredible performance, then we don't get to see him at the games. And that's a little disappointing, although I totally respect his decision to focus on his family and possibly not go to the games. That hasn't been 100% decided yet, but possibly he's not going. So makes me sad. It kind of gets you all excited about seeing like a legend who's not going to be there. But it was cool to see him do this much. I hope they backfill that one for sure, because there's a lot of strong men in the 35-39 division, which we have, for example, Brian Wong, Sam Dancer, Frederick Agidius, Elijah Mohammed. All of those are big names that are currently sitting in the top 10, so in game spots, depending on video reviews. And then in 11th, we've got Paul Tremblay, who would also be a great person to have in that division at the games if Rich decides he doesn't want to go. So I'm going to shout out some of these people who won these divisions because, like, they're all awesome, even if I don't really know a lot about them. So Samir Zarour, I probably didn't say that right, but he won the men's 40-44 divisions. That's pretty awesome. Jason Grubb won the men's 45-49 division, and he is a big name. He spoke to me a little bit while I was covering the games last year. Really cool dude. Happy to see him back on top. For men's 50-54, we have Giulio Silvino, maybe. Men's 55-59, we've got Kevin Koster. 60-64, Stuart Swanson. Ty Jenkins for boys 16-17. Dane Indrajai for boys 14-15. And 65 plus, we have Daniel Miller. So all awesome athletes. Congratulations on your unofficial semifinal win. Moving over to some of the awesome performances on the ladies' side. In the women's 35-39, the top place person, just like the men's 35-39, is a very familiar name, and that is China Cho. Awesome to see her name on top. And I was looking at the North America West semifinals roster. And you know whose name's on there? China Cho. So we're gonna see more of her, and we're gonna see her at the games one way or another. I would guess it's likely going to be as a master, but you never know. Pretty cool that she's doing both. Also on this list, we have other athletes that we've known from the individual side, and those would be Stacy Tovar, who retired a couple years ago, and Danny Horan. So I think those are two fun people to keep our eyes on, especially because these are athletes that were once our individual favorites, and now they are moving on later in life, still CrossFitting, and still making it to the games as masters. Stacy Tovar is a mom, so that's pretty cool too. I'm excited to see them back. Moving on to the women's 40 to 44 years old, Andrea Pinheiro, I believe, is our winner unofficially of the division. But second is Jen Ryan. And what's pretty cool about Jen Ryan is she is also going to be at the North American West semifinal. So I saw her on the roster and it's crazy. It's crazy that somebody in the 40 to 44-year-old division is still able to compete with the young guns. And I say it's crazy, but I really mean it's impressive because these people are incredibly fit, and it's not a fluke that they're making it to these places like semifinals with the individuals. They're just that fit, and I think that says something about CrossFit and longevity in CrossFit and how some people can be really successful in the sport real long term. So pretty cool to see her going back to the individual semis. Another really cool thing about this women's 40 to 44-year-old division is number 4, Sam Briggs. Now, she is working as a firefighter now. She retired from individual competition, qualified for semis, decided to do it, and she is in 4th right now. I hope if she gets a ticket to the games, once the reviews are done, that she goes. I don't know what her plans are, but I hope so. The first day for her was a crazy day, because 2 of the events, she finished in 1st place. And then one of the events, she finished in last. It was the lifting portion, the max snatches at 135, and she didn't get any. She posted a video of that. And we know that is her weakness, but to see that she did everything in her power by winning the other 2 events to counteract that is impressive. And she's not doing this full time anymore. She is working as a firefighter, likely working a crazy schedule, not prioritizing sleep the way she used to be because she's focused on her career now, and she's still hung on to enough fitness to do this and is still prioritizing fitness to make sure she's the best firefighter and can use that to possibly be at the CrossFit Games. I hope so. Fingers crossed. Women's 45 to 49 winner, Kelly Friel. She's a name we've seen before. Women 50 to 54, Kim Purdy, another familiar name. In the 55-59, we have Lee Coates. In the 60 to 64, we have Betsy Vanderberg. But I also want to talk about Yvonne Howard, who is in 8th place. She goes to my gym, and she's a very impressive, badass athlete and did fantastic this weekend to make it back for her 2nd year in the 60 to 64 division. And she had trouble with the last workout. The first time she did it, she got no rope climbs. And then with like 40 minutes before scores were due, she decided to redo that final workout. She improved her score by a ton of reps. Happy to see her back, hopefully unofficially going to Madison again. 65 plus, we have Pauline Skaya. Women's 16 to 17-year-old division is pretty interesting. So we have a couple women who will be competing at semis and could possibly make it to the games as an individual. So the person who won, Olivia Kerstetter, she'll be competing at the semifinals. Person in 2nd is Trista Smith, also will be competing at semifinals. And 3rd is Lucy McGongle, and she will also be competing at semifinals. So we could see any of those athletes punching their ticket as an individual. I think the one that would most likely be doing that would be Olivia Kerstetter. If you look at the points too, she won by a decent margin, about 44 points, depending on reviews. So I think she'd have the best chance. She did finish 1st. She has been in some pretty high level competitions before. She did Rogue. So if we're gonna see someone from this division, that would be my guess, but we could be surprised. And then finally, girls 14 to 15, Maria Granizo is the person who finished in 1st place there. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to spotlight all of those athletes because even the ones I didn't mention, They are incredibly fit and work very hard to be at the point to qualify for age group semis and deserve some recognition. And I was a little bit sad that that wasn't the focus this weekend. So we took a little time now to focus on them and try to give them a little bit of time in the small little spotlight I have to shine on them. All right, I appreciate you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Oh, this hand's a little ripped. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Bye.